and welcome to this meeting of the Vale Workforces Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson. I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being recorded and will be streamed on a YouTube channel for public viewing after the meeting. 3 procedural matters. So firstly, for those joining remotely, you know we're joining remotely, so I'll skip that. Secondly, if councillors wish to ask a question or participate in debate, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in turn. Thirdly, finally, as a modern council, both officers and members will be on their electronic devices throughout the meeting. I have 4 housekeeping announcements. The first is evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building to the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to your right of this meeting room, and please stand at assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The democratic officer will assist you. On arriving at this meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform democratic services if you have not done so. Secondly, mobile phones, please can they be off or silent during the meeting. Thirdly, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the application has been debated are welcome to do so via the front door in reception, but please do leave quietly. And fourthly, when the meeting is ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the virtual meeting if you're joining remotely, or make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. Final point, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public attending in person here do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberation outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. Great, and now I'll move on to apologies for absence. Matthew, do we have any apologies this evening?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from councillors Cheryl Briggs, Mike Pickles and Scott Houghton. Councillor Sarah James is in attendance as substitute for Councillor Cheryl Briggs.
Okay, thank you very much. And would you mind taking a roll call of everyone?
Councillor Ron Batstone, present. Councillor Jenny Hannity, present. Councillor Sarah James, present. Councillor Jill Rayner, present. Councillor Val Shaw, present. Councillor Max Thompson, present. I'm expecting Robert Madison as well, but
we'll see if he makes it by the time we get to our item this evening. Okay. Next, we've got the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of April 2025. Does anyone have any comments, or can I ask for a motion to accept them as correct record? Councillor Hannity.
Yes, I've read them and I believe them to be a correct list, and I would like to propose them.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that motion? I'm with Councillor Batstone. Okay, all those who agree with those minutes? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Perfect. I will sign those at the end of this meeting. Fourthly, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Can't see any. Thank you very much. Fifth, urgent business. Paula, do we have any urgent business this evening?
There are no urgent items tonight.
Okay, very good. And then finally, public participation. I confirm that we have a few speakers on the item we're going to be considering this evening. I also confirm that a statement was sent round and circulated to the committee prior to the meeting, which has been read, and we may make reference to in our questioning or indeed in our debate. And with that, I move to the first item we're considering this evening, which is the erection of a 300 megawatt battery energy storage system in Appleford. And Amanda, I believe you're presenting on this one.
Thank you, Chair. By way of update, since publication of the papers, there's been some further work undertaken on the conditions as set out in Appendix 5. These have now been updated and refined with plan references and full wording in discussion with the applicant and agreed. There are some changes to the detailed wording and order of conditions, but the content is substantially the same, other than the temporary period condition, which is 45 years, which is consistent with the time period as set out in my report. The revised list has been circulated to members. The second point is, whilst the council has been in email correspondence with Appleford Parish Council, no formal comments have actually been submitted in response to the consultation for this planning application. However, most recently, an email of the 17th of June has been circulated in order to provide further information on the Parish Council's concerns. So the planning application proposes the installation of a 300 megawatt battery energy storage system, otherwise known as a BESS, in the south of Appleford Road, approximately 1 kilometre southwest to the village of Appleford. The site is currently open agricultural land and does not lie within a landscape or statutory ecological designations. BESS are designed to capture and store energy from various sources, including renewable energy, and allow for the storage of excess energy during low demand periods and release during peak demand times. which helps to stabilise the energy supply and improve grid reliability. It can also provide backup power for critical loads in residential, commercial and industrial settings. It comprises rechargeable batteries which store the electrical energy, inverters which convert stored DC energy into AC energy for use in the grid, along with control software. Both national and local policy are supported with schemes that will assist in the transition to a low carbon future. Battery storage is a low carbon technology that can help to reduce carbon emissions, and they're important for the replacement of fossil fuels with renewable energy, as they use batteries, lithium-ion batteries, to store electricity. For context, this is the first BESS to be determined in the Vale. A scheme at land adjacent to the Cowley substation was approved at South Planning Committee last week, and that was for a 200 megawatt scheme. A further scheme is currently under consideration at Lower Road, Garsington, which is in the Green Belt. An appeal has recently been held against the refusal of Planning Commission for a BESS at land north of Culham Science Centre for a 500 megawatt scheme, which is also in the Green Belt, and was refused on its impact on the adjacent registered park and garden. The details of the likely appearance of the installation are set out from paragraph 1.2 of the committee report and shown in the appendices. It will be connected to Didcot Power Station via an underground cable, which will be dealt with under separate provisions. The proposal is submitted as a full application, as an outline application is not appropriate for this likely development. Considerations of the proposal is based on the Rochdale envelope approach, which can be employed when the nature of the proposed development means that some details of the whole project have not been confirmed when the application is submitted. For example, precise dimensions of structures and the design of the technology is moving so fast. The flexibility is sought to address uncertainty. Such an approach has been used in other consenting regimes, for example, under the Electricity Act, and in renewable applications where an application has been made at a time when the details of the project have not been finally resolved. These slides give an indication of what the development might look like. The white units represent the more modern units currently being installed across the country, and the green units indicate the older battery storage facilities that were previously consented, but it goes to demonstrate how the technology is changing all the time. The proposal as submitted has been assessed on the worst case scenario of development, which has allowed consideration of the likely mitigation measures envisaged, and officers are satisfied that they are adequate to deal with the worst case in order to minimise the effects of the development on the environment. This report sets out the policy background and relevant planning considerations. The applicant has undertaken an assessment of alternative sites, a key consideration of which is the proximity to the transmission network. Key planning considerations in dealing with this application are landscape impact, noise, highways, ecology and archaeology. No objections have been received from statutory consultees or technical consultees, and where appropriate, conditions have been recommended to mitigate the impact of the development. The proposal would have some landscape impact, which is generally of a low-level profile that can be adequately screened, and the application proposes a full landscaping scheme which enhances tree and buffer planting along the site boundaries, which would help to soften the proposals. It's not considered that the proposed development would cause a level of unacceptable landscape and visual harm that would warrant refusal under planning policy. With regard to ecology, conditions have been imposed to ensure protection of newts at the site, and also to allow for reconsideration of sustainable drainage arrangements. The nearest existing residential properties are 260 metres to the northwest of the site, and this slide shows the residential that's been proposed under outline planning permission to the east of the site. So this indicates how the development is likely to be laid out, but we haven't received the reserved matters application, which will set the final details. However, the noise impact from the proposal has been assessed against a number of nearby receptors, including the nearest property as shown on this layout and the nearest existing residential property in Applefoot, and also a number of public footpaths. Environmental health officers have raised no objections in respect of harm or disruption to residential amenity, and a condition would be imposed to require the development to be carried out in accordance with the submitted noise report. As a result of archaeological concerns raised, the layout of the scheme has been reduced to allow areas investigation to be retained in situ, and design parameters have been submitted under the Rochdale envelope, which show that a 300 megawatt scheme can still be provided within a slightly reduced layout, and these parameter plans are confirmed in condition 3. The next slide just shows some photographs of the site in its local environment. So some images taken from the public right-of-way along the eastern boundary. That's Moorditch, which is referred to in some of the plans. You've got Didcot landfill site, or Sutton Courtney landfill site in the distance. This is looking slightly west-northwest. And this is a view from the public right-of-way, again looking north towards Appleford Road. Looking south-east. So you can see the existing boundary treatments along the site, and this is the frontage with Appleford Road. There is an access point here with a gate, which is actually the secondary access that's being proposed to the site. And these are some photos from the landscape and visual impact assessment, which have assessed the likely or representative viewpoints and likely impact of the development from a landscape perspective. So I think that's it in terms of the slides. So just finally, whilst concerns been expressed regarding the lack of community benefit arising from the application, it wasn't considered that any specific community benefit proposals would be appropriate in this instance. Developer contributions can only be sought towards the provision of necessary infrastructure to mitigate the impact on the local community. The developer proposes additional landscaping, which will have biodiversity benefits, and the developer is also working with the council's employment officers to provide a community employment plan, which will promote the use of local employment sources during construction. With regard to fire safety, this is covered in some detail in the report, and no objections have been raised by Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Services. Condition will be imposed to require the approval of a fire safety plan to ensure that all relevant information is provided to the fire service and that the development accords with the most up-to-date standards. For these reasons, it's therefore recommended that the application is approved subject to conditions and a legal agreement to be finalised to secure the implementation of a habitat management and monitoring plan for B&G for 30 years.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers on this application. So our first speaker is a representative of Appleford-on-Thames Parish Council, Greg O'Brien. I assume Councillor O'Brien, is that correct?
Well, that's correct. Yeah.
Excellent. Please, well, thank you for joining us. You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and I think we'll get a 30-second warning, and then committee may have some questions and clarification for you afterwards. So please, when you're ready.
Okay, I hope they have questions. Okay, my name is Greg O'Brien, and I represent Appleford-on-Thames Parish Council. Appleford is a country village of approximately 400 residents. The village suffers from many negative consequences of noise, odour, general disruption from the commercial operations to the west of the rail line. These are monitored by OCC, and Councillor Stevens, who chairs the local liaison committee, can attest to the many problems arising, particularly in relation to the ability to monitor and enforce planning conditions. We do not object to all applications, in fact, relatively few, but only those that affect the lives of residents. We note and recognise the benefits of best technology, and we've sought to assess positives and negatives objectively and have reluctantly come to the conclusion that this application be rejected. The reasons for the objections are set out in our email of the 17th of June, but if I could focus on there is no escaping the fact that this application fails a fundamental test of paragraph 198 of the NPPF. That is, a new development is appropriate to its location. How can an industrial development of this scale, 5 acres, at the gateway to a country village, on agricultural land, be appropriate? The question here is not can it be accommodated? The question is it appropriate for the location? And we conclude it's not. It's very close to the village and to future housing, right beside Appleford Community Orchard, and may transgress subsection C on tranquil areas. Personally, I believe this site to be best suited for housing. That's a personal view. The site carries significant risk. The risk of explosion can't be ignored. The greater the capacity of new energy batteries, the greater the risk of explosion. The calculations provided were made by a retired nuclear physicist and PhD who worked exclusively on energy and related risks all his life. Fire risk, probably the biggest risk here, and it can be caused by many factors: equipment failure, lightning, break-in, you name it. The incidence of lithium fires is increasing exponentially. This year, Moss Landing in California, people had to be evacuated from a wide area and the whole area locally was contaminated. OJMS, another example, the fire burned for 6 days. It's quite common for the fire brigade to leave these fires to burn out, and they're quite toxic. Network Rail requires an asset protection agreement, and the desktop preliminary risk assessment focuses on pollution leakage. The battery safety management plan said there will be an emergency response plan. But risk assessment, where is the risk assessment here? I don't see it for such a large installation beside a village. There is also a flood risk that can't be ignored. That field is constantly flooded. None of the photographs show that. We have set out some concerns regarding the lack of information on the developer and their experience. But in conclusion, can I urge you to reject this application in its present form on the grounds it's inappropriate and not suited to the proposed location. The risk of siting a non-benign development in a country village is too great, and the risk of flooding makes the site unsuitable. We respectfully request you to reject this application based on our genuine concerns here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it up to committee and ask if anyone has any questions of clarification. I guess I have one. You mentioned that in its current form, you object to this application. I mean, is it, and I know it's your personal belief that this would be a better site for housing, but I mean, what about its current form?
The scale of it.
Do you think is inappropriate? The scale is the main.
The scale, it carries some huge risks that can't be ignored. And the scale of it for the size of the village, it's 1.5, if not 2 times the size of our recreation ground. It's not small. It would house 5 or 6 soccer pitches. It's it's constantly flooded. I've mentioned that. So I just think it's not appropriate to a country village. So if it were amended, we don't seek to object to applications willy-nilly. And I think it's just too big.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Are there any further questions or clarification? In which case, thank you very much for your time this evening. And I will now turn to our second category of speaker. I think there are 4 speakers, but I believe only one of you is speaking, and then 4 are around to ask questions. So is it Mr. Grant Fixter? You'll be speaking on this. Well, please. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your. I mean, everyone is welcome to come to sit down if you wish. It's up to you, however you want to approach it. But as I say, you'll have similarly 3 minutes, or let's say 3 minutes, then summary of 10, 15 seconds if you need it to speak on this, and then there may be some questions of clarification. And if you feel that one of your colleagues is better to answer questions, please do direct us towards them. Please, when you're ready.
Good evening, members. I'm the planning agent for this application, and I'm joined by Tom Holdaway and Alex Mitchell from TBC Partners, in addition to Gary Mattingly from Green Fire Solutions, all of whom are on hand to answer any questions you may have on the scheme. Proposed development is for a 300 megawatt BESS scheme connected to the national grid. BESS are a critical part of ensuring the transition to a more renewable energy grid can take place. There is a requirement to deliver a greater amount of renewable energy, but technologies such as wind and solar are intermittent, only generating when weather conditions allow. This means demand and supply are more challenging to match. Large-scale energy storage can help to reduce the cost of constraints and the amount of renewable energy lost by charging up using excess renewable energy when constraints do occur. The proposal is therefore crucial to maximising the efficiency of existing and future renewable electricity generation and to meet the government's objective of maintaining a reliable electricity supply, enabling carbon net zero to be achieved by the target date. In February 2019, the District Council formally declared a climate emergency with the formation of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, which followed. The Planning Design and Access Statement demonstrates how compliance with all relevant local and national policy is being met, confirming the principal development is acceptable. The statement also illustrates how the proposal's design has involved incorporate findings from technical reports. All larger infrastructure has been sited in the southwestern extent of the site to assimilate into existing views of the former power station, landfill, railway line, data centres and consented road scheme to the west. The alternative site selection assessment outlines why energy storage is needed in this area, owing to built and consented schemes in the vicinity, and through the thorough land search process the applicant undertook, which confirmed the site was the least constrained available site for this proposal. Technology has significantly advanced over recent years, with safety against fire being even stronger. An outline fire safety management plan was submitted with the application, whilst drainage has also considered fire water and provisions needed on site. Gary Mattingly is happy to advise members in this respect. Drainage on site will be improved as a result of the proposal owing to the introduction of a drainage strategy, whereas the site currently has no strategy in place. The proposal is acceptable from an ecology and landscape perspective, with a significant 113% biodiversity net gain being achieved. There are no concerns on highway grounds, which includes traffic movements, access arrangements, and it has been demonstrated vehicles can enter and leave the forward gear. The noise impact assessment confirms there will be no significant noise impacts from the proposal, whilst also outlining how the assessment was based on a worst case scenario, far worse than will actually be the case once the proposal is operational. There will be no negative impacts on ground conditions, whilst Oxfordshire County Council Archaeology have confirmed the proposed reduced scheme would be acceptable on heritage grounds, subject to planning conditions. To conclude, the relevant material planning considerations for this proposal have all been thoroughly assessed prior to submission and throughout the determination period. Compliance with all relevant local and national policies has been demonstrated. There are no objections from consultees. As such, there are no material grounds as to why the proposal should not be supported. We have worked closely with your officers, consultees and stakeholders, and we respectfully ask members to follow the officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn to the committee for any questions we have from you or your colleagues. Any questions? Councillor Hannah.
Yeah, first, I'm quite interested. What made you look at this site particularly? Knowing presumably that there will probably be housing, etc. So why makes this site for you a viable site?
Yeah, no worries. So the client, Tom might have some more knowledge on this, basically undertook a alternative site selection assessment. That essentially starts with where you can get your grid connection. So this area was one of the areas that needed the most area of storage, and there's only 3 substations at the time that could accommodate. The one in Didcot had the biggest required for capacity, so that was the starting point. Then you've got the cable route length. So typically speaking, you do a 5-kilometre circular radius, which can allow for some bends in the cable route. Anything outside of that, you can look to start getting serious constraints, such as loss of transmission, power, costs to the grid connection, etc., and it becomes unfeasible. So that then drew like a 5-kilometre circular radius around the power station, the substation, sorry. Then you have the River Thames to the north. Anything above that would be significant costs going under. It'd be quite difficult to do. And then the main road to the south of the power station, again, that will provide some constraints. So that left, hard to describe the shape, but it was like an R on its back essentially. And then from then, it was a targeted search of what pieces of land were available. We agreed with many people at the consultation event that obviously the ideal place for this development will be within the confines of the former power station. It's all tied up. There's land agreements on it. It could not get on it. Then you look at other available sites, and then you assess any available sites essentially based on the material planning considerations. The other available sites were either too big, too small, or there was quite significant ecological constraints, such as being close to protected areas. And this was the site that ended up being chosen as the most materially planning sound site from that process. I don't know if you've got anything else to add on that.
Yeah. No, I think Grant's covered all the sort of major details on that. Obviously, the alternative site selection assessment goes into, I think, on a site-by-site basis, why we've ended up at this particular location. But just to echo that this is the closest feasible location we could get to the substation. We spent about 6 to 9 months trying to work out the perfect location for this before we ended up doing it.
So I don't know if you've got further questions.
No, I think if you've got another one, it might improve my question.
I want to hear a bit more about fire safety and what assessment we've done. So we've heard that risk assessment, well, from our previous speaker said the risk assessment either hadn't been done or wasn't done sufficient. So I'd like to know a bit more about what other fire risks here, what sort of risk assessments have been done on fire and those sort of issues on this site.
Yes, so I'll do a bit of an introduction and I'll bring Gary and our fire experts. So essentially it starts with the flood risk assessment that looks at the fire design guidance and how much water storage would be needed on the site in case there was the event of a fire. What I would say is that technology is progressing at a really rapid pace. To put it into perspective, and I think it's outlined in the design and access statement, we had the type of battery unit from about September. And then just before submission, there was a newer, quieter, more efficient form that came out. So that then got incorporated into the scheme. The fire suppression systems are essentially operate on their own. So it's separate from the main system. So if there's ever a power cut or anything, the fire suppression system keeps going. There's monitors within, it's constantly remotely monitored. Any increases, etc., will send alerts, and then certain processes can happen. So I'll hand you over to Gary.
Yeah, hi, Gary Mattingly, retired officer from Oxford Fire and Rescue, and also 6 years to Oxford Brookes University, looking after their engine test cells as well. So just coming from that background and that perspective, I'm fortunate enough to be able to manage Abingdon Fire Station for at least a couple of years. So I've got some sort of local knowledge of this particular area too. In terms of the standards that will be applied to this particular equipment that comes in, it's a NFPA 855, which is an American standard, which covers the integration, if you like, and the installation of the whole particular site itself. In amongst that, you will describe some of the areas that we've spoken about a battery management safety system, about how that will be monitored, and that's covering over about 6 layers. You will look at advanced off-gas detection. So if any of the cells themselves start to deteriorate, there will be a gas detection system that's identified there. Thermal runaway, which is described, that comes through, I think we've spoken about before, where the battery disintegrates and starts to it almost sort of has that explosion level and then feeding into the next cells. Water sprinkler systems will sit within this particular technology as well. You would look at active vent systems. So if it does start to actually pick up any forms of gases, then automatic vents open. There's also a temperature sensor that sits within these particular systems as well. If it hits a particular threshold, alerts go to engineers. If it increases by another threshold as well, the battery discharges 50% of its own capacity and it stops receiving any more. If it hits another threshold, again, that whole particular cell can de-energize and then progress on from there. If I can, I'll just touch on the points that the gentleman picked up on, 2 incidents that were raised, if that's okay.
I'm afraid at this stage, actually, because we won't be able to have a response. We can probably leave it at that stage.
Okay.
If that's all
Yeah,
right.
no problem.
Has anyone got any further questions or clarification?
Just on fire as well, it's important to know that whilst this is a 45-year life cycle of the scheme, the batteries will not be pushed to their limits for 45 years. They will likely be replaced 2 or 3 times throughout that lifetime, which is another layer of security.
Thank you. Councillor Rain.
Just to pick up on what you said earlier, that this obviously wasn't your first choice of site or maybe your second choice or whatever. Did you consider the scale of it when you looked at this site and how that scale would, affect or possibly affect the vicinity and the feeling of the parish? The parish council said that they had no that they, in its current form, because of scale, obviously they felt they couldn't support this. But did you look at, available smaller options here, or was this a sort of this size or nothing location?
So I can't personally comment on that. Alex and Tom might be able to help on that. In terms of the actual scale of the site required itself for a 300 megawatt BESS, we couldn't go much smaller because then logistically with access arrangements, 2 accesses, the need to space infrastructure at certain distances, it wouldn't work. If you go for a much larger site, then it just wouldn't be feasible. And on scale, what I'd say is, as Amanda touched on, the scheme has actually significantly reduced from discussions with archaeology, which now, I don't have an exact figure, but it essentially leaves nearly a third of the western extent of the site undeveloped. I think we're losing about 28 batteries, 1 AC twin skid, and 1 transformer, and that will not be developed on. It's in conditions. That's the parcel of land that's closest to the orchard. Provides more relief. It'll be biodiversity net gain. That land cannot be developed on its own conditions.
Thank you.
Councillor
Yeah,
Hanley,
I-
sorry, so do you need to?
Yeah,
Is there
just
some more?
add a little bit on.
Sure, please.
It's like American.
Oh yeah, I'm Alex Mitchell. I work for TBC Partners. I'm a chartered planner. I've been a planner for 18 years, so I was part of the site identification process from a planning perspective. So there was a number of sites I looked at as part of that early process and discounted. And this was one that obviously I did a fairly in-depth appraisal of how I thought it was quite a good site. And if I didn't think it was a site that could have got to the stage in where we're at now, we wouldn't have gone for it. So it's quite a rigorous process. There was a lot of, planning eyes on it, shall we say. So I just thought I'd just add that in.
Yeah.
So, all right, Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I was just going to say about the maintenance and keeping an eye on this, and you're not going to just abandon it, presumably.
So there will be, sorry to,
No.
there'll be maintenance visits. This is why once it's operational, it's essentially just sits there and it's dormant. There'll be a regular vehicle that will probably attend site once every month, maybe once every 2 weeks, just to do maintenance checks. And then it is, owing to the technology, then it is pretty much remote. And then obviously there'll be assessments on the infrastructure, just checking everything is working fine, monitoring its lifespan. And then, like I said, if equipment needs to be recycled, such as batteries, that will be looked into.
Are there any further questions, clarification? Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, have any of these best sites been built out yet in the UK?
Yes, there are quite a few which are operational. In terms of exact locations, it's one of those things where somebody asks you to give you an example, and I can't think of what's off the top of my head. I think there's one in Manchester.
Yeah. I've been working in the sector since 2019, and I've gone through the whole process of planning, and then been part of a number of sites that have been built. We've done ones up near Derbyshire in previous roles before I was at TBC. So I have been through the whole process, seen how batteries have evolved, and gone out there with our builders, monitored the conditions, and worked with the site constructors and who build the sites to ensure all the conditions are adhered to, and going out explained all why we need certain documents, so all the ecological appraisals, how they tie in. So that I've been part of that whole life process, if you see what I mean.
So how long have they been operating, roughly?
Oh, probably 5, 6, 7 years. Some of the earlier ones I've been out. So I don't know when the first battery sites were in this country, but I know I'd say there's probably been quite an upward curve of them being built over the last 5, 6 years, I would say. But there's not loads of people building them just because it's still quite a niche sector, really. So
Yeah. Have there been any problems with any of the sites that have already been built out?
In the early stages, whilst the technology was quite still new, yes. There's no point being around the bush. If you do a Google, one of the first things that pops up is the Liverpool incident. But the technology since then has evolved rapidly, and that is probably 4 years ago, I think. And like I said, September we were looking at one form of battery, and then we changed. The reason why the submission was delayed, we were supposed to be going December, but this new form of more efficient, quieter, safer form of battery came out. So, and this is another thing why we're going down the sort of maximum design parameters route. The site plan probably won't change much at all. It's just to account for if a newer form of battery technology comes in, that again will likely be safer, more efficient, quieter. That can be incorporated into the scheme.
I'd also probably add to that the most problematic period is the construction period, but even that's not constant. It's just a period sometimes where there's a number of vehicles coming and going from the site, but after the site's been built, it's relatively, the vehicle numbers are very minimal. The noise that we've touched on previously is very, very low. So it's that construction period where when we go to these consultation events, that's something that we're very open about. And obviously we've submitted information to talk about vehicle numbers and that kind of thing. But that I would say is probably the area that causes the most disruption.
Can I have one more?
Well, I've got 3 people who want to ask questions about it. So, Councillor, if you've got a follow on, please do your follow on, and then I'll bring in Councillor Batson and Councillor Hanley.
I was just going to ask about remote monitoring. That's ongoing, is it?
Yes.
And that's what, 3 cameras around the site? Or
cameras, and it's basically technology which feeds into another remote form of
Yes,
technology. Sensors, yeah.
And it's the same with that is lighting as well on the site. They're on, instead of like if there was an animal to get on the site or something, the site won't be illuminated like a football stadium. It will be just isolated where that light has been triggered.
Thank you. Councillor Butson.
In fact, I think that is very much my question. I wonder why there was any need for external lighting on this site.
It's just part of the, if something were to happen, or if something needed to access site during the night time, you've got the lighting there. But like I said, the solution to that is low level motion triggered lighting essentially, but not triggered by animals. So if there is the need to get onto the site in the case of an emergency, which shouldn't happen, then there are provisions in there for people to access the site safely.
So normally there won't be any lighting at all.
With these schemes, there is always some lighting, yeah.
That's handy.
No, I was just wondering, were they the other two sites up in the northern? Was that on brownfield sites, or was that actually on a field?
One was a greenfield, green belt site,
Okay.
and the other one was next to. Was it a brownfield site? No, neither of them were brownfield sites actually. Two of them were in
Just
Rochdale.
interesting.
Yeah,
One of them was in Stockport.
we're finding that more and more schemes such as this in the Greenbelt are starting to become consented, because inspectors have set some sort of precedent with saying that renewable energy sort of sets some very special circumstances. So it's not uncommon for these to be allocated on Greenbelt, never mind the countryside. So it is sort of varied.
Any further questions? Can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
And I will now, Councillor, would you like to 3 minutes? You can if you wish to have 3 minutes. In that case, I will call upon our final speaker on this application, Councillor Stevens. That's all right. So, well, thank you for joining us, Councillor Stevens. As with everyone else, we've got up to 3 minutes, and then there might be some questions.
I've not actually prepared any words, but I listened to you guys, and obviously Greg listened to you before. And I suppose my concern, which I've shared with Amanda earlier on, is that your application should be considered as part of an overall plan for the area. So obviously we're fortunate in a way to have Didcot be in the connection to the national transmission network, but that means that we might get lots of carpetbaggers coming in, putting loads of battery applications. There's one that came in yesterday, and I'm sure you know, Amanda, that it came in from Brockwell Energy for 300 megawatts too, right next door to you on brownfield site. And also from, I believe there will be a number of other applications coming in because of preference being close to Didcot. And I'd like to see it sort of joined up thinking. So rather than just accepting the first one, but accepting it as part of a joined up plan. And that might be premature because I'm not sure how we can do that. And I'm not sure how you can put conditions in place. But given that we've got another one in the pipeline and several more sort of teeing up for it, that we should consider you in light of the overall strategy for the area that takes into account restoration and public amenities and the local residents too. I am concerned about fire and flood risks because that is a flood area. I think that recently FCC have been trying to remediate flood problems across their site for a year because 100-year storms is not 100 years, it's kind of every other year. So I'd like to have harder conditions applied to flood and fire as well. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about. Just the knowledge of other stuff coming along, fire and flood, make sure that we've got climate protection in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just check if anyone's got any questions or clarification for you.
Oh, I might just want to ask just.
No, I'm afraid you can't ask directly to anyone in the rest of the room. You speak to the committee, I'm afraid. Once people have their slots to speak, then it's just to speak to us. So I'm afraid I'll have to leave it at that. But I'll see if there's any questions for the committee to you. I can't see it, so thank you very much for your time this evening, Councillor Stevens. No, I'm afraid. I'm afraid once people have spoken, that is the end of it, and we're now in debate and questions for officers. So at this point, there's no further engagement. So thank you very much. I now invite questions for our officer. Does anyone have any questions for Amanda? It's Councillor Happy.
Firstly, I don't know whether I should have declared this one the cabinet member for fire and rescue for county. just so it's the first time I've seen this. I've had nothing to do with this one. So I am pleased that we have talked to the fire and rescue, because I'm perfectly aware of battery fires in vehicles, etc. So I'm perfectly aware of that and the difficulty of putting them out. So and I think that is an issue to take, but I believe that's why I asked you about what technology and how you're managing it, because it really does need to be managed. And if we are going to have a plethora of applications, I suppose once one is agreed, then you might get more. This is the only reason. It's the safety angle for me. We've had no objections. You know, I always go to the statutory. We've had no objections. And we've heard that there will be some hopefully a lot of safety and monitoring. So I suppose what I'm going to say to you is why you thought this was an appropriate place, considering we're going to have housing supposedly near, or would this be a problem with any application for housing near?
Well, the application for the site adjacent to the east has got outline planning permission for residential, but I mean originally it was identified as retained farmland, so it wasn't actually intended to be developed upon. But as I say, outline plan permission has been granted for I can't remember how many houses are on this site. So we are waiting for the reserve matters. But in terms of noise impact, the noise impact study has assessed the impact on on that nearest property as identified on that illustrative plan, and indicated that there isn't going to be a noise issue at daytime or nighttime. And in terms of sort of landscape impact, the landscaping scheme proposes sort of additional buffers along that boundary as well. So and we're determining this application on its merits at the moment.
This is the other thing, which you've answered that. I was going to say, have we got sufficient landscaping? I think that's really essential on that.
Yeah, the landscape officer is satisfied with the proposals that are being put forward. We will be putting a planning condition on asking for a new landscaping scheme to be submitted. So it gives us the opportunity to look at it in further detail to see whether there's in further enhancements, and looking at plants and densities and heights of plants and trees that are going in as well.
And highways have got no problem. So thank you. That's my question.
Are there any further questions for our officer? Councillor James.
Yeah, I've got a few questions actually. I might start with one bit related to what Councillor Stephen just said about considering things like this alongside other energy storage applications and other energy related matters. And I'm aware that we are in the process with other councils in Oxfordshire of having our local area energy plan put together. And I wonder how this kind of decision relates to that, whether we kind of already need that LAUP in place to be kind of making these decisions, or whether we should be almost waiting on these decisions for a local area energy plan. What's the relationship?
Just as a general comment, we have to make a determination on this application as it's currently presented in the light of the current planning policy position. In my opinion, it wouldn't be reasonable to defer it to wait for that plan.
Right.
It will, and it's good that the council is committed to working on the plan, and that will become a material consideration in due course. But as at this stage, as I say, the applicant is entitled to a decision as presented. Amanda can just comment on the newest application, the very, very recent application that was referred to by Councillor Stevens, just to give a bit of context, if that would be helpful as well.
So the other application for the BESS has come in, and it's a county matter, so it's gone to OCC because it's on their land as a Minerals and Waste Authority. And so we've been consulted on it, so we will be providing comments, but we'll say that's a separate application being determined by a different authority.
And so in short, these are not things that we would be able to give weight today.
Not at this stage.
So, Cassius, do you have any further? You said you had a few questions, so I thought I would just let you. Please.
Actually, yeah. So my second question was going back to the fire safety, which obviously a lot of people have asked about, and I think there's a condition here to ensure that. So I think the comment from the fire service was that there should be sufficient water on the site and clear instructions at the gate as to where that water supply is. Who decides what sufficient water is, and what happens if there's not a sufficient water supply? Who decides?
I'm not sure that I could comment on that, apart from the fact that the detailed fire safety management plan is required under conditions, so that'll set out those details.
And we would consult with the fire service again at that point.
Yeah. I would also add that the condition that we originally had was changed slightly in consultation with the applicants, so we'll have a better understanding of how the fire safety management works on the site. So the actual title of the document was changed slightly, so to better reflect their understanding.
Which condition is that?
Condition 20 in the new list.
Yeah. And not unrelated, third question was also about the conditions. So the Environment Agency, in their response, they did comment that the subspace, and they're happy that it was fine from the point of view of drainage arrangements, that it is within 10 metres of one of the waterways on the boundaries of the site. And they have requested that there are conditions to control. And I saw there's a condition about getting a more detailed plan about that, including the planting and things like that. Does it allow for actually increasing that space to the waterway? I'm not sure that the plan.
I think it allows for alternative options to be explored on the site as well. So whilst the applicant has demonstrated that the sustainable drainage system works on the site, and I think the Environment Agency have said that they wouldn't necessarily find it a reason for refusal, subject to those conditions being imposed. By having that condition, it allows us to discuss alternatives on the site that would make it better.
Right, okay. And the Environment Agency again would be a consultee on.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for our officer before we move into debate? In which case, I'm suggest we move into debate on this. So would someone like to put forward a motion on this application? Councillor Vanstone.
Yes, I propose that we accept this application. I think officers from all over the place have done a great deal of work looking at this site. And I think they've dealt with most of the possible planning objections, and I see no objections from any of the statutory authorities. And I see no way of actually improving much on the existing conditions. So I think I don't think we have any grounds for objection to this application.
Okay, I'll see if I have a second for that motion. Do someone like to second that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Councillor Hannaby.
And I just like to say that I believe that once it's up and running, they've got to go back to the fire and rescue service, and they have to be satisfied that what's done is satisfactory from their point of view. So therefore, if they don't like it, then it won't be able to start up. Is that correct? I've just the opposite. Is that correct?
The condition requires.
I have read it, but I can't remember.
It says it shall not be brought into operation
That
until
should
the
not
fire
be
safety management plans be submitted to and approved in writing. So.
Yes,
Okay.
the tenants approved in writing. Thank
So we have a motion to accept the offer recommendation with these amended conditions that we've had circulate amongst us. So I open the floor. Would anyone like to say anything further on this application? Okay, in which case I'm suggesting we take a vote on this application. So all those in favour of the motion to approve? Those against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous, so that passes. Thank you very much to all our speakers on that application. I now move to the final item on our agenda this evening, which is appeals information. And this is to receive an information report from the head of planning. Consider and note the appeals information report. Paula, do you wish to say anything on this, or is this for us solely to note?
It's for noting and general information on how we're getting on in terms of applications launched and results. So yeah, no particular cases I wish to draw your attention to this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So, can we note that?
Yes.
Okay, so noted. In which case, I bring this meeting to a close. So, if I could please just confirm the meeting has stopped the live stream, and I just want to thank all our speakers this evening, all of our councillors, and all of our officers on this application. Thank you so much.